Good evening, my name is Polly Keppel and I'm here representing the League of Women Voters and will be moderating the forum for candidates for City Council from the 10th Ward. The League is a nonpartisan political organization founded in 1920, shortly before women were given the right to vote, to make sure they had the knowledge to cast an informed vote. Today, the League's mission is to inform all voters and to encourage civic participation. Although the League endorses positions, it does not endorse candidates or political parties. It welcomes both men and women in our membership, and if you'd like more information about the League, there's information out on the table. This forum is being held before the party endorsement process begins. DFL precinct caucuses will be held on April 16th. Republicans will use delegates for last year's precinct caucuses. The Green Party held an endorsing meeting on February 17th, and there is no information available at this time about the Independence Party. It is important to know something about all the candidates because you will have an opportunity to rank your top 3 choices in the election on November 5th, and there will be no primary election in September to narrow the field. Thank you for attending this important candidates forum, and now a few ground rules. No campaign literature or signs inside the forum hall, but there's a table outside that you've probably already checked out, and there's lots of good information there. The candidates drew numbers to determine the order of opening statements. And written questions, many of you have already submitted yours. I think there's a big stack over there that Sarah and Sally are going through. And if you have other questions, raise your hand and we'll try and answer the questions that represent interests expressed by members of the audience who've submitted questions. The candidates will have up to 2 minutes for opening statements and up to 2 minutes for responses to each of the questions. The time limits will be strictly observed, and our timekeeper will hold up the cards, Nancy, visible to the candidates, indicating how much time remains. We will begin opening statements with Meg Tuthill. Okay.
Thank you, Polly, very much. First of all, thank you to the League of Women Voters for sponsoring this forum tonight in the Southwest Journal. Also, thank you to all of you who come out. Wow, what a great crowd. This is terrific. I am the 10th Ward City Council member. I am up for re-election this year, and I'm looking forward to finishing some of the things that we have started together. One of them is the opening of Nicollet Avenue. Another is curbside organic recycling. We just need to finish rolling out single sort before we can really dig our teeth into that. I'm also interested in continuing to take a look at trying to keep our property taxes down. I voted against the mayor's property taxes in 2010 because it was a 4.7% levy increase. In 2011 it was 0, and this year was 2.7, so I'm very interested in trying to keep a handle on those taxes. Also, I sit in the Civil Rights, the PSCH, Public Safety, Civil Rights, and Health Committee for the City of Minneapolis, so what falls under that committee is police and fire protection, so I've been very involved in that as well. We do have a current new cadets training going on right now in both the police and the fire department to raise our numbers, because through attrition we are losing members in both those departments, so it's really important that we keep those numbers at a safe level for our communities. I'm a former business person of over 30 years in this community. I'm very proud of that. It's the 3rd business that my husband and I owned. My husband and I, along with a few other folks, about 12 of us, started Lena, the Laura Hill East Neighborhood Association that most of you know as the Wedge. We also did the first recycling in the city of Minneapolis out of the back of our dairy store. We were biking in the city of Minneapolis long before there was one bike path around the lake. My husband used to bike 9 months of the year from our home to his job in St. Louis Park the first few years we were here. We have very deep roots in this community. I've been involved in this community all of my life through the neighborhood associations, through the DFL party, through the Minneapolis public schools, and I'm also very proud of the fact I've been a Girl Scout leader.
Thank you. Ken Bradley.
Thank you. First, I'd like to thank the League of Women Voters as well, the Southwest Journal, and of course First Universalist Church for hosting this forum. My name is Ken Bradley. I've lived in Minneapolis for nearly 30 years. I'm an energy and environmental organizer by trade. I'm an advocate for providing financial assistance for students in need. I'm running to provide fair, open, progressive leadership as your next 10th Ward City Council member. I believe that Minneapolis can be a leader at reducing global warming emissions while creating good paying jobs and attracting emerging industries. Here are my priorities. First, ensure development reflects the character of our neighborhood. We need to repurpose historic buildings rather than tear them down. We should not follow the inefficient development model that has done a disservice to our suburbs. I will be a strong advocate for reconnecting Nicollet and Lake Street. It's time to reconnect our neighborhoods and open Nicollet and Lake Street. I will support entrepreneurs, new businesses, and emerging industries. The cities that will be stronger in the future will be the cities that attract the businesses of tomorrow. I will build inclusive government and that supports partnerships and community collaboration. One strong example, families that are dealing with inequalities in jobs, transportation, and housing often have children that are struggling academically. We need to work with our schools and others to ensure that these children have more opportunities. I'll support alternative transportation and development that is bicycle and pedestrian friendly. I'll support enhanced bus service on Hennepin, modern streetcar on Nicollet, and enhanced transit services on Lake Street and the Midtown Greenway. And finally, I will work to reduce polluting energy by supporting energy efficiency and local renewables. Minneapolis should not sign another 20-year franchise agreement with our public utilities without a guarantee that they will meet the city's global warming emissions goal.
Thank you, Ken. Lisa Peterson-Bender.
Thank you so much to our hosts and for everyone for being here. I'm Lisa Bender, and I want to be the next City Council member from Ward 10 to make sure that our community defines its own future instead of letting others define it for us. We live in a special place, a place that Ryan and I chose to raise our family because we love living in a diverse urban community where we can walk to the grocery store, bicycle with our daughter, and shop at local businesses. The neighborhoods of the new Ward 10 are growing and changing, and it's an opportunity to make things even better than they are today. I will provide the leadership we need to bring people together around a shared vision for neighborhoods that are connected and healthy, that provide education and economic opportunity for all. We need to improve our transportation system to reduce congestion and connect people to the places they want to go. I will work to improve transit access to downtown, reopen Nicollet Avenue, and build a network of safe and accessible sidewalks and bikeways for everyone. Here in Minneapolis, we have one of the healthiest populations in the country, but we have high disparities between rich and poor. That's why I will fight for the tools of good health to be available to all, get toxins out of our environment, and make sure we're supporting our farmers who are growing healthy food right here in our community. Like many parents, I want to send my daughters to a thriving neighborhood school, so I'll work with the school board to address overcrowding, close the achievement gap, and make sure we provide a great education to all of our kids. A community that is connected and healthy and educated welcomes economic opportunity. And I will support that by working with businesses to cut red tape and grow jobs close to where people live. The next City Council member from Ward 10 is going to need to be able to bring people together, say yes to good ideas, and make sure government is working for our community. I will provide the leadership we need to bring people together and the leadership we need to get results to make our community stronger. And that's why I ask for your support, and that's how we'll earn your support as the next City Council member from Ward 10. Thank you.
Thank you. Kendall Kelly, please.
Thank you. First of all, I want to thank the Southwest Journal and the League of Women Voters, and I want to thank the League of Women Voters for all their great work last November in defeating the voter ID amendment, which would have been very detrimental to our community. My name is Kendall Killian, and I am seeking the DFL endorsement here in Ward 10. I've been out knocking on doors. I've knocked on 700 doors in the last 2 months, and the first question I ask nearly everyone I meet is, what do you love about living here? Everyone has a slightly different answer, but really, there's no wrong reason to love our neighborhood. I'm running for city council because we all deserve a council member that respects all of us and all of our reasons for living here. When I first moved to the neighborhood, I lived in a cheaply furnished apartment. Today, my wife Kelly and I live in a beautiful old house on Bryan Avenue. In between there, I lived in a condo. We deserve a council member that respects all of us, no matter where we are on that spectrum. When whether you've lived here for 40 years or 40 days, we deserve a council member that respects all of us. Whether you're from Mogadishu.
More to, enhance the public realm in places where we're concentrating growth and development, and improve our transportation system. We've seen, over 1,000 new residents, and we're planning for more, but we haven't seen any improvements in our transportation system. That's why we need to improve transit access to downtown, make sure that we get it right in the Midtown Greenway corridor, build a great transit system on Nicollet Avenue with a reopened Lake Street, and build a bicycle and pedestrian system that really works for people. Thank you.
The question will be next addressed by Meg Tackell.
Would you please repeat the question?
Yes. Do you support policies that encourage an increase in urban density?
Absolutely. When my husband and I chose to live here, we both came from suburban areas. This was a conscious choice, was to move into one of the highest dense neighborhoods in the city of Minneapolis because we were very interested in raising our children in a diverse community. We also were very interested in not having to get in a car every time we turned around. For the 30 years that we owned a small business in this neighborhood, I walked 4 blocks to work. Before that, I walked 2 blocks to work. So this has been very important to us, and we have watched the density grow in the neighborhood, and I think smart density works well. But under my watch, we have also repurposed the Buzza building. The Buzza building was totally rented except for 1 apartment at their grand opening. I worked very diligently with the developer on that building to make sure that they understood the historic aspect of that building and how the community wanted to keep it, and along with the access to the greenway. So these are some of the projects that I have worked on. But I do firmly believe that we need smart development, and just because the zoning states one thing does not necessarily mean that that project is going to fit into that community. What I have done for the last 3 years, and actually the last 40 years, is sat down with developers to get the very best project that we can get for the community that will work for our new neighbors and also work for the rest of the community. And I intend to continue to do that in my next term.
Thank you. The next responder will be Kendall Killian.
When I was out meeting with folks the other day, I see John Martin here, who lives on DuPont Avenue, and I talked to his dad, Philip. And Philip asked me, Kendall, what is it about our area? How do we maintain this special sauce that makes Ward 10 and this area so wonderful, the great mix of people? And I think it's very important that we do work to maintain that we keep the identity of each street and Lyndale Avenue and Hennepin and Lake Street, and that people really feel that the creative sector and the arts can really thrive. And if we gentrify and just kind of tear everything down too quickly, I don't know if we're maintaining that character. But I do think that increasing population, that there really is a progressive case to be made for increasing population in our community. Because first and foremost, it's welcoming. All the same reasons those of us in this room love living here are the same reasons lots of people that don't yet live in this neighborhood want to live here. And when we say, we pull up the ladder and we say, oh no, the lifeboat's full, that isn't an inclusive, welcoming message. And so I really think there is a progressive side to development that we really need to emphasize. Smart development, transit-friendly development, on our transit corridors, on Lake Street, on Nicollet, on Lyndale. I also think, and this is just me as a partisan Democrat, saying that if we have more population in Minneapolis, we're going to have more representation in the legislature and in the United States Congress. And when we have that, we're not going to have hateful amendments put on the ballot that want to break up our families. So there's a lot of good reasons to support development. It has to be done in a smart way. We have to maintain the character of our neighborhoods. We need to involve the neighborhood groups. We need to listen to people. But really, this is something that we need to be open to and keep an open mind. One final thing, I've learned from my union background that when you say no to something right away, you don't have a seat at the negotiations table. So we need to, at least initially, listen to people and be open to things and not say no immediately, because when you do that, you're not left in a position to get what you want and mitigate concerns.
Thank you very much. Ken Bradley?
Great question. First, I support urban density. I think we need urban density in our city, but it's how we do it that matters. So, for example, a few years ago, the corner of 31st and Hennepin, we had a 3-story brick building that was torn down there. That was actually a building that met our city's small area plan for that area. And then we replaced it with a 2-story building, which did not meet our small area plan. I think that throughout history, whether we're looking at Kmart on Nicollet and Lake Street or the CB2 on 31st and Hennepin, when we do suburban style development, we fail our city because we're not embracing who we are and what we are as a city. And so we have to make sure that we're not doing suburban style development in our city. At the same point in time, I think there are elegant ways of taking historic buildings and integrating them into new development. A great example is on the corner of 12th and Hennepin, the new Lund store. They took an old historic building that used to be used, it was a motor company back in 1912, it was first built. They redesigned it, they rebuilt it, they added on to it, and in a really elegant way, repurposed an old building. So we should be thinking about how do we repurpose old buildings whenever possible, but then also, we need density on our transit corridors. But one of the big problems we have right now is we're building the density in our neighborhood, but guess what? We haven't developed the transit to support the density. We need to develop the transit in this corridor to support the density so that our city can be healthy, thrive, and be successful in the future.
Thank you. The next question. Given the era of limited resources, what would be your top 3 budget priorities for the city of Minneapolis? And Kendall Killian will be the first responder.
Well, first of all, I think police and fire have to be the #1 priority. Public safety, keeping people safe, and doing the core business of the city, which is to protect people and make sure that we're safe, has to be our #1 priority. The second thing I want to add, and I don't think this is necessarily my second priority overall, but it has to be mentioned, is that we had a lot of voting lines and things in November during the election because the city and the current council reduced the number of voting precincts by 20 less voting precincts. Huge lines, some precincts there were over 3,000 people packed into one precinct, including a monster precinct in the Whittier neighborhood, and that really makes it more difficult for people to participate in democracy. I think that when it comes to budget cuts, the last thing we should cut is democracy and people's access to participating in our political process. After that, after police and fire, I really think that our second priority and the thing I really want to work on as a city councilor is equity. We have 2 cities in Minneapolis right now. There's a lot of us that are doing quite well, and a lot of the rest of the city in different minority groups and things really struggling. We have one of the largest equity gaps of any city in the country. And our city isn't really going to succeed unless everyone succeeds. As Paul Wellstone said, we all do better when we all do better. And I truly believe that. And that means focusing on transit, it means focusing on affordable housing, focusing on things that are going to help people get up and get a job and be part of our community in a full way. Because unless everyone truly succeeds and achieves the American dream, our city really isn't reaching our full potential.
Thank you. Ken Bradley.
Well, first, I actually want to echo what Kendall just said. I think that he's right, that we do have 2 cities, and we have an equity issue in our city. The fact is, we live in one of the most prosperous neighborhoods in the entire city. We're really pretty fortunate people. But the fact is, you can go to other places in this city that are struggling. Not the fact that they would love to have arguments over development. Just so you know, there are places in the city that would love to have arguments over development, and they would love to have that as a problem. And so we need to realize that we're a whole city. I'm not just a city. If I'm elected city council member, if I'm honored to receive your support, I'm not going to be the city council member of the 10th ward. I'm going to represent everyone in the city because it's important to understand that we're all successful when we work together. The fact is, anywhere in this ward, you can't buy a 1-bedroom condo for $200,000. But we can buy 3 properties and places in North Minneapolis for $200,000. And the fact is that those families and those communities are dealing with various inequalities, but one of the biggest inequalities we have is the inequality in wages. Wages have been stagnant since 1973, and we need to do something about that. So my top priority would be economic development. My second would be improving our infrastructure with a focus on transit development and making sure it's bicycle and pedestrian friendly. And my third would be police and fire.
Thank you. Meg Tuttle?
Thank you very much. Goes without saying that most people are interested in police and fire protection as number one. And as your city council member for the last 3 years sitting on public safety, civil rights, and the health, we have been working on this diligently. We know we're going to have attrition. We know that we need to be hiring new firefighters and new police cadets, of which we're doing right now, as I mentioned earlier. The other thing is the elections that happened in the last election is absolutely, totally a disaster. I totally agree. But one of the things that wasn't mentioned about the last election is we had almost double the people do same-day registration. I don't know how you plan for that. As a former restaurant owner, boy, it was hard to staff our staff. You know, some days we would have 20 people in for lunch, and the next day we'd have 60. So it's really hard to know that. But we did take some hard lessons away from this, and we've been working very, very diligently to make sure that for the next election that people will not have to wait in lines like this. We've moved polling places and a few other things. One of the things that most residents don't know that my dad would call the not-so-sexy stuff in government is we need people in infrastructure in the city. And when you think of infrastructure, I'm sure you're thinking of roads and sewer and water. That is part of it, but the other part of it is we are mandated by the federal government and the state government that there are certain things that our city clerk's office needs to do to meet those regulations. We've got to watch how much we have cut in our support staff in the city of Minneapolis. It is really, really important. Without a good support staff, we got officers off the street writing reports instead of on the street where they belong. So this is really important to make sure that we kind of look at the balanced approach, which is really important, and the collaborative approach to government to make sure that we get the services and the things that we need.
Thank you. Lisa Bender?
Thank you. I think that perhaps there's a silver lining sometimes to budgetary constraints because it allows us or forces us to be creative in how we provide services. And as someone who's worked in government, I've worked both as an advocate and someone within government, I know that the best government works best when it leverages partnerships from community organizations and the private sector. So my top 3 priorities would be to create the smartest police and fire departments in the country. And let's look at the best practices in fire. How are our response times compared to other cities? And make sure that our investment in fire is really getting people the best service that we can get. And again, with police, I think we have an incredible police department in Minneapolis. We have an amazing network of community service officers that build relationships that really know their community. And we need to continue to invest in that as well as in prevention, crime prevention, domestic violence prevention, those programs that work. The second is our transportation system. And this is where I provide a lot of leadership in creating a transportation system that where we are efficiently implementing a system that works for everyone, that increases transportation options. So every time we tear up a street, we're looking for opportunities to make it better, to implement our bike plan, to create a better pedestrian network, and potentially make it better for transit riders as well. And there's no reason we shouldn't be doing that. At the same time, it saves us money and it makes our transportation system better for everyone. And finally, I would invest in health and economic development. And you know, I've said that our health outcomes here, we have high disparities in health. And that hurts all of us, it's expensive. And so we need to invest in prevention. Our health department is doing incredibly creative work in health prevention, especially in communities that have been underinvested, to increase opportunities for physical activity and healthy foods. And we also have really wonderful programs here to increase access for loans that support small businesses, which is often, you know, a great way for our immigrant community, our small business owners to build equity. And those are programs that both help individuals as well as grow our city's economy.
Thank you very much. The next question. What would be your approach to opening up Nicollet at Lake Street? What kind of a project do you envision going in that location? And we'll direct this to Ken Bradley.
Well, this is my favorite question. Because when I was a kid, my dad lived in 19th and 1st. I come from a My parents were divorced when I was a kid, and my dad lived in 19th and First. He also lived in the Wedge for a while. And I went to church at Bethlehem Stewart Presbyterian Church in Pleasant. And I remember when the Kmart was first built and driving down Nicollet Avenue, and my father getting to that point and saying, "What kind of an idiot would build a road in the middle of the building in the middle of this road? Someone should drive a bulldozer through the store." And that memory stuck in my head all of my life. And then I realized that 40 years later, it's the same attitude everyone has about it. I mean, we're all disappointed that there's a building in the middle of Nicollet, which is actually an example used and studied in universities across the world as horrible development. So I think it's the most exciting thing that could happen. I really do. And I think that what will happen when we reopen Nicollet and Lake Street, it's going to have an effect that impacts not just Nicollet and Lake, but beyond that. So when that happens, I think we're going to see some density in that corridor, but I want to see it bicycle pedestrian friendly. I want to see it integrated into the greenway so we have interconnection, so it's almost as though it's a super highway coming off of there. I think that we're going to see multi-use. We're going to have multifamily homes. We're going to have retail, restaurants, and other purposes. And I think that it really is probably the most exciting part of this entire ward is reopening that. So I'm pretty excited about it. And at the end of the day, I think, and I will tell you that I wasn't quite convinced of immediately, I'd love to see it, but I am now. I think a modern streetcar running down Nicollet Avenue is a pretty darn good idea. And I think that it will make that neighborhood even stronger and better. And I didn't come to that easily. There are some problems with it. It's not perfect. But I think that, we're not talking about the Rice-Cerrone streetcar. We're talking about one that's pretty fast, pretty efficient. It's going to get people from point A to point B.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Lisa Bender.
Thank you. This is one where I think we probably all agree that it's really important to get this right. But I am uniquely qualified, I think, to manage the conversation about what happens at this site. And it's part of why I'm running for city council, because we need to have a positive conversation about what happens at that site, or we'll end up with that Kmart store sitting there for another 30 years. So I would take an approach of starting with a big vision. We have a complicated set of stakeholders wanting to look at this site. There are 3 private landowners. There's the city, there's Metro Transit that's looking to improve transit on Nicollet Avenue, and then of course there's our community and our neighborhood associations. So we need to have a conversation about how we want that place to look and feel. I don't want to dictate that, but rather have a broad conversation about what are important goals for our community. Having talked to hundreds of you, I know that a lot of our goals have to do with maintaining a balanced transportation system, our commitment to social equity and environmental sustainability. One of the things that's going to be really important about that site is getting the design right. It's a huge site. So we need to make sure we don't forget about the ground floor and only focus on how tall the buildings are. We need to make sure those buildings are beautifully designed and they're designed to last. And we need to make sure that it's tied to the conversation about transit. There's a decision to be made about bus versus streetcar. There's never been a 9-mile streetcar built at once in the country. So we could get a bus faster, but a streetcar would potentially be another great option. And finally, one of the reasons our housing is so expensive is because we keep building housing with lots of parking. And one parking space costs $25,000 for one parking space. If we put a ton of parking at that site, we're going to limit the amount of affordability we can put in those units. And this is a part of the city where we should be providing affordable housing. So making sure that we are incorporating that into the whole decision, the whole conversation about what kind of development goes there is really an important priority for me.
Thank you. Kendall Killian.
Recently I saw a list, I think it was on MidCoast or something like that, and it had the top 10 worst urban planning decisions made in Twin Cities history. And can you believe it? This was not even on there. I think whoever wrote that should, I don't know, maybe their degree should be revoked. What's that? So, really this is about partnerships, right? Because this is a massive project that's going to involve the federal government with the 35W issues. It's going to involve the county, it's going to involve the Metropolitan Council, it's going to involve the state and the State Department of Transportation. And what we need to help really get this done is someone that really understands how to liaison between different governmental units. And as a government relations professional myself, and as someone who's earned endorsements in this campaign from Senator Jeff Hayden, who represents that area, from Metropolitan Council Member Adam Dunick, who's the Vice President of the Midway Corridor Community Advisory Committee that's being put together. We're going to partner together and work together and find the solutions that work for everyone. But it really takes someone who understands how to leverage different governmental units and different entities together, and I know how to do that. Finally, I want to say one more thing about that space, and that is that when we first started having this conversation, or at least when I became aware of this conversation about 15 years ago, people used to say, tear down Kmart. And I'm actually very glad that we now say open up Nicollet, because that Kmart store is actually very dependent upon by a lot of sectors of our community. And as much as big box retail is not where I choose to shop, it is a place where a lot of folks in our community depend on buying cheap clothing and things in order to have food for their families and things like that. And so it's really kind of callous when people just say, tear down Kmart, get rid of that, let's put in, Trader Joe's or something. And that isn't, we have to maintain, the shopping spaces for people that depend on it.
Thank you. Meg Tato?
Perfect to have me on this question. I was down at City Hall when we talked about when the city sold Nicollet Avenue to the private developer. So I've seen this from the beginning and I want to see it through the end. The opening of Nicollet Avenue is not just that parcel of land. We've included about a 6 square block parcels so that we can look at the development in a broader sense than just that one piece of land. So that's really important to know. The other thing that's really important about it is that we are talking with transit, the neighborhoods, and the Lake Street business people as well to see what their needs are. So we are bringing a number of people to the table. The former Sullivan's grocery store their lease has been taken over by Jerry's. If you have not been in the store, I recommend that you go in. It is absolutely fabulous. They have cleaned it up, the cleanest floors I've seen in a grocery store in years. They have really taken a look at their niche marketing for the folks in the community, and that's really important as well. Kmart would like to stay. They understand in order to stay that they need to have a smaller footprint because they do serve the community there. And part of the reason that they've done so well and been successful there is the fact that there is terrific bus routes along Lake Street for folks to use, and there's the Midtown Greenway. So we do have some transportation there, but as we look forward to getting the private owner to sell back the street to us, and that's the big negotiation. Once we get that done, that's when you bring everybody together, and that's what we've been working on in the city with staff and other council members and the other partners in the community for the last, I'd say we've been working on this about a year. So I would be thrilled to be there when it gets opened.
Thank you. The next question. How will you represent all your ward residents, both renters and homeowners? How will you engage them? And Kendall Killian is the first to respond.
Well, I rented apartments in Minneapolis for 15 years up until relatively recently, and I think that it's very important that we have a council member that can really represent everyone, regardless of whether they're a renter, a condo owner, or a homeowner. 75% of this ward is now renters, and that rate is much higher in the Whittier neighborhood. And in order to represent everyone, to me, I'm an organizer, right? I believe that the world doesn't just belong to those who show up. It belongs to organizers who get people to show up. And it's not our job to just sit back and say, oh, they didn't come to the meeting. It's our job to go out and make sure everyone comes to the meeting, that we deliberately invite them in, that we knock on their doors, as I've been doing for the last 2 months, and say, how are you? Welcome. What's important to you? How can we, engage you and bring you into the community? I talked to someone who said that they wanted to get involved in a neighborhood group, but the neighborhood group had 3-year terms, and that they couldn't be a part of the neighborhood group because they, as a renter, just didn't feel like they could make that long-term commitment. And I just think things like that really create barriers to participation for renters. I also want to say that we really need to restore the renters' credit that has been greatly cut back in recent years. Renters do pay property taxes. They pay it through their landlords, who get many of the same benefits in terms of property taxes that we as homeowners get. And we have to find ways to pass those property tax rebates and credits back down to the renters, particularly low-income renters, as we used to, in a very progressive way. And those were cut in recent years under Palenti and the Republican legislature. And I think having someone in this role who has connections at the legislature like I do and knows the halls of the Capitol and can really go over there and get things done, this is one area where I think particularly the uptown city councilor needs to be at the Capitol advocating for renters, and I look forward to doing that.
Thank you. Ken Bradley?
Well, like Kendall, I've rented quite a bit here. I've lived above Via's Vintage Clothing, but it then became the Hustler store, so it changed. All I know is when I lived above there, everyone said, "How are the heroin addicts?" Because that's who lived in my building. And I lived at 25th and Emerson. I used to walk by Meg's store often, and at night I'd hear "Go ahead, pump 8, go ahead, pump 8" all night long. So renters deal with noise issues just like those of us in single-family homes. And they have struggles like all of us do. And I as well am a community organizer, and I've organized people for a long time. I serve on the Blue Green Alliance Committee. I'm the chair of the Solar Works Committee, which is 150 nonprofits, unions, and businesses. So I'm used to kind of working with various different sects of people. We need to figure out how to actually get renters engaged, not in the normal process, but even in this political process. In 2009, at the caucuses, about 90% of the people that attended were single-family homeowners, probably like most of us here. The question is, will they participate in the political system? We need them to participate in the political system. We need to be active now in the caucuses, and then we need to continue to be active in political life afterwards. But we can work with them, we can coordinate with them, and they have concerns just like all of us do. Matter of fact, a lot of renters are very different. The 20-somethings, 30-somethings, they think about the world a little bit differently than my generation does. A lot of them actually don't want to own a car. They don't want to own a car. They have an iPad, they have a cell phone, and that's the life that they have, and they want to go from point A to point B. And so we have to understand that they think differently about the world, and we need to work with them to figure out how we can make Uptown work for them.
Thank you. Meg Tudhill?
Thank you. I have been a tenant, a landlord, and a homeowner in this community. I've owned a business in this community. I've owned 2 other businesses with my husband in this community and downtown. We became involved as renters. We moved in as renters because we were looking for the kind of lifestyle that was available here. And that lifestyle to us was being able to get around by transit, bike, and bus. And that was really important to us. How we've engaged rent tenants, let me tell you, when we owned our fourplex that we owned on 23rd and Bryant, fourplex, yeah. We offered our tenants 1 month's free rent if they would attend the neighborhood association meetings. We felt it was important. When we organized the neighborhood association, we knocked doors, we called landlords to get permission, because in those days they couldn't lock you out, to get permission to go in and door knock the tenants to see if we could get them to come to the annual meeting. And in those days the annual meeting was more like a potluck supper, meet your neighbors, that type of thing. It was not a big long meeting where you had to sit down and volunteer in a community. What I'm doing now is I attend all 7 of my neighborhood association meetings monthly. I attend all 7 of the business community meetings monthly. I do a lunch with Meg once a month, and I'm also available certainly in my office, and we do a newsletter. I will continue those things and also continue additional outreach to the community, which is exactly what I've done for the last 40+ years with this long-term living in this community.
Thank you. Lisa Bender?
Thank you. So engaging renters is critically important because they make up a huge portion of our population. But it's not that simple. The question was asked because it's not that simple a thing to do. And so I think we need to think about, how do we design our processes? How do we make public decisions in a way that's accessible to all kinds of people? And so one thing that's coming up soon is that we are going to update the comprehensive plan for the city's growth for the next 30 years. It's a critical opportunity to get feedback from all segments of our population. And we need to design a public outreach process that reaches people, that provides opportunities to get involved online, that schedules meetings at times when people can attend. One of the reasons I started the Minneapolis Bicycle Coalition a few years ago was because the city was holding meetings for critically important streets at 3 o'clock in the afternoon when a lot of people can't attend. And those simple things really limit public involvement, not just from renters, but from all kinds of people in our public process. So sometimes it's a very simple thing to get more people involved. Like Meg, my husband and I are very involved in our neighborhood organization, and it is a huge time commitment. It's a labor of love, the neighborhood organizations, and they play an important role in our public process. But we need to make sure that there are ways for people who don't have time to attend a monthly meeting or serve on their board to get involved in the decisions we're making. And one of the things I think that helps with that is to make sure that we're having broader conversations, like our comprehensive plan or the small area plans, and that we don't have the same conversation every time a new development is proposed or a new street is proposed. We have these visions and plans for a reason, and so we don't need to make people come to a meeting every single time. We shouldn't make them come to a meeting every single time. And finally, we have a rental problem in Minneapolis, like our population problem. It's hard to find a place to rent. Our rental market is very tight right now. We need to make sure that we are providing rental spaces for people. We are going to lose out to other cities that are going to keep and retain the top talent that are coming to our great university, and we don't have a place for them to live after school. And again, it comes back to the affordability levels in our housing. We need to make sure we're providing housing for everyone.
Thank you very much. Our next question, what is your vision for mass transit in the uptown Minneapolis area, and how soon do you think we can accomplish it? And Meg Tucker will be the first to answer.
Sorry, I'm still writing. It's a really kind of an interesting situation with mass transit in the uptown area only. If you're south of Lake Street, you don't have the transit options that I have north of Lake Street. I live on 24th and Bryant. The 17 bus goes down the corner, and in 40 years I've never had a bus schedule. I haven't needed one. But I know that our friends and our residents that live on the south side of Lake Street don't have that same option. And that is something, as we're looking at the new transportation plan with our plans for the Greenway and having either streetcars or a small bus, that has not been decided yet, go down the Greenway to connect the Hiawatha line along with our other transportation needs in the 10th Ward, that it's important that we take a look at south of Lake Street. If I am impatient when I walk to the corner, I can go to Lindale or Hennepin and pick up a bus within another 3 or 4 minutes. So there's really some big discrepancies within the 10th Ward on mass transit service. We won't get light rail down the Greenway, we know that. So we've got to be looking at other things like limited stops. That makes a big difference. That will get more people out of their cars and on the bus so that they know it'll take 20 minutes to get to work instead of 45 minutes. So things like that will help immensely, but we do need to ramp up certainly our bus service or any mass transit south of Lake Street.
Thank you. Lisa Bender.
Thank you. I would take both a short-term and long-term approach to improving our transit system. There are things that we can do right now to make transit work better for people. For example, in our bus shelters, we can put the signs that tell you when the next bus is coming, and that makes transit a lot more accessible and easier to use for a lot of people. We have opportunities coming up on Nicollet Avenue in the Midtown Greenway corridor, and I think it's important to keep an open mind right now. We're going through a transit alternatives analysis on those two corridors, and I think we should really keep an open mind about bus versus streetcar in those corridors, because as I mentioned before, no city has built a 9-mile streetcar system all at once, and the amount of time that it would take us to build the full line on Nicollet through Central with a streetcar is significantly longer than it would take us to build an enhanced bus service. And so I think we should wait and see the data and look at the transit benefits that we're going to get, and then do a real thorough cost-benefit analysis and see which one is really a better investment for our community. And similarly in the Greenway corridor, in both of those, I'm very concerned about the impacts on biking infrastructure, both on Nicollet and Central, as well as in the Midtown Greenway, because that's a critically important part of our transit system. Our Nice Ride system is really an extension of our transit system. And so I would continue to make sure to support a Nice Ride system, as well as improve connections to transit. And finally, we need an advocate for Hennepin. Hennepin is a tough corridor. It's got a lot of demands, but we need somebody who's going to advance Hennepin to make sure we are planning for improved transit in that corridor, because we need a better connection to downtown. Sometimes you can walk to downtown faster than the 6, and that just isn't right, because that transit line serves a lot of people, and it should be serving more people that we're adding to our community. So we can't expect people to take the bus. A lot of people who have choices, if we provide a lousy service. And then we have a huge part of our population that's transit dependent, and we owe it to them to build a transit system that is efficient and moves people quickly.
Thank you. Kendall Kelly?
Well, to build the next generation city, we do need a transit system that moves people and gets people where they need to go. I was on the Southwest Light Rail Advisory Committee for the Park Board, working to mitigate some of the concerns that folks had in terms of the Southwest Light Rail line and how that would interact with our precious parks. And through that, I really learned that people care deeply about wanting to have a transit system that works for everyone, but people also really want to make sure it doesn't have a negative impact on their own community. One of the things that this question reminds me of is this idea of where is Uptown, The question is, how do we get transit into Uptown? But people my age have a much broader idea of what Uptown is than a 1 or 2 block radius around Hennepin and Lake. When I talk to folks, all the way up into 21st and Bryant, they consider themselves in Uptown. Garfield, a couple blocks to the east into the Whittier neighborhood, they consider themselves in Uptown. And I think we need to have an expansive view. This is a $1 billion brand, Uptown. So when we ask the question, where is transit and how can it interact with Uptown? To me, that includes Nicollet Avenue. It includes the whole Midtown corridor and how we're going to connect the Hiawatha Light Rail line over to the Southwest Light Rail line at West Lake. So I've been talking a lot to my friend Adam Dunnick, who's on the Met Council, about the transit alternatives study that they're doing in the Midtown Greenway Trench. And I really think we need to make sure that it works for everyone and that it really benefits the businesses on the street, on Lake Street. And we can't have a situation that just kind of gets people through our area, but doesn't actually get them out interacting with the streets and interacting with our wonderful businesses.
Thank you. Ken Bradley.
Well, I was told no props. So I'm not going to pull my bus card out of my pocket. But I actually ride the bus, so I'm one of those people that ride the bus. And I've ridden the bus for many, many, many years. First as an artist who had no money, and then later just as someone that realized that owning a car is a pretty stupid investment. The average American or the average Minnesotan makes $43,000 a year. The average person spends $9,000 a year before taxes on an automobile, which means you spend about 20% of your income on a car. I know when I first told people I didn't own a car, and then I rode the bus, and I ride my motorcycle, and my wife and I have a car that I share, so I'm not going to say I never drive a car, because I do. And I ride my bike. People said, how are you going to make it without a car? People were like shocked as though they had met Frankenstein or something. And the fact is that I say to them, how are you going to make it with a car? But now, thinking about what's happening in Uptown, first, I said before we need enhanced bus on Hennepin, which means faster bus service from point A to point B. I'm telling you for a modern streetcar, and I know other folks are not saying specifically what they're for, and I understand that there's still discussions to be made about this, and I'm open to other ideas. But as a bus user, I'm going to say I think modern streetcar is a pretty darn good idea, and will really enhance our city. In the Midtown Greenway, the thing is, we talk about it, do we want to build stuff down in the ditch? Because that's what it's referred to. Do we want to put a streetcar in there? Light rail is probably not going to happen, bus, or should that be on Lake Street? So I think that that's more broad open to figure out what we're going to do. But ultimately, we need to have our transit development meet our community's needs, and especially serve the next generation.
Thank you. We're coming up to our last question. The questions were so good and there were so many that we're going to run about 5 or 6 minutes over. And the last question is, what will you do to support small businesses in the 10th Ward? And we will start that question with Lisa Bender. excuse me, if you want, since this is the final question, if you want to incorporate a bit of a final statement as part of your response, you're welcome to do that.
Thank you. Small businesses are the heart of our community, and I've heard from so many of you that one of the things you love best about our community is shopping at small businesses. So it's really important that we support them. It's also a ladder for a lot of our community, especially our immigrant community. Minneapolis has a lot of great innovative business loan programs that I would continue to support. I also think we need to do a better job of improving access for individuals to banking. The issue is linked. I had the chance to work on a really innovative program in San Francisco, which opened up banking to individuals that had a lot of barriers to banking, and I think that really helps go hand in hand to support our small business community. One of the things that small businesses face is a web of regulations. I was talking to a small business owner that just recently opened a hair salon, and the plumbing inspector didn't like her toilet seat, and so she had to wait another week to get her permits, and that delayed her opening her business. I think that the recent reorganization of regulatory services is a great first step to making sure that our small businesses don't face barriers to getting their shops open and up and running, and face a bevy of bureaucracy when they're just trying to get their stores going. And finally, a lot of our small businesses want to invest in public spaces. I happened to walk into my coffee shop, Spy House, one day, and he had a petition out because he was trying to build a plaza outside his business. And those are things that we should be supporting. I would like to work with businesses to open up cafe seating, sidewalk markets, to look at flexible use of our parking spaces to create parklets and additional seating and open space. And this just all continues to support the vitality of our neighborhood. And that is one of the things that is most important to me. One of my early mentors was Enrique Peñalosa, who was the mayor of Bogota, Colombia. And he talked about equity. When we're at our jobs, our happiness level is about the same. But it's during our leisure time that we have the biggest differences between rich and poor. And so our investments in our public spaces are critically important for making our city work for everyone.
Thank you. Meg Tadhill.
I know you're all thinking that my husband submitted this question, but he didn't. I am the only person on the Minneapolis City Council that has owned 3 small businesses in the city of Minneapolis. I'm the only one at this table that has owned any small business in the city of Minneapolis, let alone on the 10th Ward. I know what it's like to open a small business. I know what it's like to struggle. I know when you need to advocate for that small business that is opening and to go to licensing regulations and talk to them about what makes sense. I've done that. I've done that for the last 3 years for a number of the small businesses. I'm going to use Morrissey's as an example. They're opening, they want to be open by St. Patty's Day. Duh, Irish bar, of course they do. When they contacted me and came in our office and we started to look at the timeline, we found that it was a little bit short for what's a normal procedure. We did what we could, we speeded it up. They're going to be open this weekend. This is what you do when you've got the experience of small business. This is what you do when the regulators tell you this may not happen. As a former small business owner, I can tell you it can happen, and we can make it happen, and I make it happen. It's really important. I want to just do a little summation for you. We've talked about a lot of visions for the city and a lot of things that are needed in the city, but I want to make it very clear to you what this job is. This is a roots job. I'm the person you call when your street isn't plowed, when your garbage isn't picked up. That is 90% of this business. It takes up a lot of time, and that is our job. And that's really important. I know customer service. I've done customer service for over 30 years, and I do return phone calls and get back and solve problems for my constituency, because that is a large portion of this job. Thank you.
Thank you. Ken Bradley.
Thank you. I love sewer and garbage. I'm very fond of it. First, I serve as the chair of the Solar Works for Minnesota, or I recently served. For those who don't know, I left my job as of Friday, so I'm campaigning full-time now. So, to my opponents, I apologize. To my wife, I plan to back him a lot. I will tell you that the city of Minneapolis doesn't have a great record on this. I'll tell you a story about a company. 10K Solar, Joel Cannon, Dallas Myers came to the city of Minneapolis, asked for funding. They wanted to build a plant where? North Minneapolis. One of the most economically economically stricken neighborhoods where things are not going well, because Joel cares about the city. He's lived in the city, he went to school in the city, he wanted to do that. He worked the city for a long time, things didn't work out, and he finally got frustrated and they went to Bloomington, and that's where they ended up. 10K Solar has about 90 employees today. They're doing pretty darn good. They're creating an innovative product, they're very, very successful. I want to make sure that stories like 10K Solar don't happen again. I want to make sure that those companies want to be in Minneapolis and don't choose not to be here. Other issues related to it in particular, Whittier has the most self-employed people of anywhere in the city. Whittier does. There's the largest amount of self-employed people. There's a lot of people that are self-employed. I was once self-employed and worked for myself a long time ago, so I have worked for myself. And so at the end of the day, we need to support new businesses, entrepreneurs, and make sure that our city is a place where they want to be. We also have to know that the most critical thing to making those businesses work is the millennial generation, the 25 to 35-year-olds. They're going to be the engines of it. So they have to want to live here. And they want to live in a very different community than they want a different type of community that doesn't involve owning cars. They want public transit, they want to bike and walk to work, and that's the city I want to deliver.
Thank you. Kendall Kellyan?
When I first moved to Minneapolis, I worked at Dayton's downtown, and for 6 years, actually. And we had what we call the yes first attitude. You know, it's one of these corporate deals. But and what it meant was, you know, if somebody says, you know, do you have these socks in blue? The first thing you say is yes, and then you'll figure out if you actually do. And so, but I really think that needs to be the approach with anyone that comes to us with an idea to open a business. Is we need to say yes, and then we need to figure out the details and guide them through the bureaucracy that can often happen at City Hall, and guide them through the regulation and truly be their ambassador. You know, not just send them on their way, but say, I'm going to put you on hold and we're going to call over to this person right now. We're going to get this done. Or come down here and I'm going to walk you from station to station and we're going to go get every permit you need. And really, truly help them, guide them through it. I really think that we have to have a yes-first attitude and treat everyone that comes to us with an idea about opening a business in our area with the respect they deserve. One of the things small business owners like all of us deal with is property taxes. And of course, that question was never asked, believe it or not. And you know, of course, the big increase in property taxes that many of us have experienced in Minneapolis is because of the real cut in local government aid to Minneapolis from the state level. And I really look forward to going over to St. Paul and partnering with our legislative delegation, with the folks that support my campaign and those that don't, and asking them and working with legislators from around the state to restore local government aid. On that note, I'd like to invite you all to an event with our special guest, Speaker Paul Thiessen, who will be joining us for a conversation on March 24th at 3 o'clock at the home of Allison O'Toole, which is at 3801 Aldrich Avenue South. And come join Speaker Thiessen and I as we talk about how we can improve the connection between City Hall and the Capitol and really get a good deal for Minneapolis.
Thank you very much. I'd like to thank the audience for the terrific questions. Many of them we didn't get around to, and I'd like to thank our candidates for the equally terrific responses. And if you didn't get your question answered, there will be another 10th Ward Forum sponsored by the Neighborhood Green Teams on Thursday, March 28th at the Bryant Square Park at 6:30 p.m. And there will also be...
7.
Pardon me?
7 o'clock.
Oh, it's 7 o'clock, okay. 7 o'clock at Bryant Square Park on the 28th. And also there will be a forum with the candidates for mayor on April 3rd at 7 p.m. at St. Joan of Arc Church. So those are the 2 upcoming forums to participate in. So thank you very much and good night.